All right, welcome to my presentation. It's titled How God Uses Translation Instruments. I chose to do my presentation on Unit 3, the Book of Mormon, and major concept number 3, translation instruments, the seer stones and the Urim and Thummim. And the reason I chose this was I've always been intrigued by the translation process. I think growing up in the church, we often simplify the translation process and think maybe Joseph just transcribed from the gold plates onto a piece of paper, but that is not the case. He used these tools, and so I wanted to learn a little bit more about them. So the type of doctrine that I think this is a supportive doctrine. It's not necessarily a core doctrine, but it definitely supports the core doctrine of the Book of Mormon's authenticity and divine origin, and helps explain how it was translated. So there's two scholarly articles that I was able to find that I actually found very interesting. The first one was Stan Spencer, Seer and Stones, the translation of the Book of Mormon as divine visions of an old-time seer. And in that one, he kind of explains how both the Urim and Thummim and the seer stones were used in the process. An interesting quote that I found from that one was uh, this. He said, "The ancient Urim and Thummim is certainly portrayed as a visionary instrument in the Book of Abraham. Abraham used the Urim and Thummim to see a great vision. He not only saw stars and spirits, but also heard God speak to him by the Urim and Thummim, which experience he described as talking with the Lord face to face, as one man talketh with another." Just thought it was interesting how it's not just Joseph who has used the Urim and Thummim. Prophets of old, such as Abraham, also used it, not necessarily to translate, but to receive revelation from God. And the other scholarly article is by Richard E. Turley Jr., and it's titled Seer Stones, Salamanders, and the Early Mormon Folk Magic in the Light of Folklore and Studies in and Bible Scholarship. That was really interesting too, if you'd like to check it out. Some of the prophetic talks that I found that related to this, when I first started researching this topic, the one that came to mind was Elder Holland's Safety for the Soul. I read this quite a bit on my mission. And a little bit more of a broad and spiritual kind of overlay of the Book of Mormon's coming forth and the authenticity of it, and that Joseph wouldn't have gone through all of that kind of pain and suffering and ultimately died to bring forth the Book of Mormon if it was not true. And so that one's really interesting. I like that one. And then another interesting one that I found was President Nelson. He gave a talk to some missionaries at the MTC back in the 90s. And one of the quotes that I found interesting was this. He said, Joseph Smith would have put the seer stone into the hat and put his face into the hat, drawing it closely around his face to exclude the light, and in the darkness, the spiritual light would shine. A piece of something resembling parchment would appear, and on that appeared the writing. One character at a time would appear, and under it was the interpretation in English. Brother Joseph would read off the English to Oliver Cowdery, who was his principal scribe, and when it was written down and repeated to Brother Joseph to see if it was correct, then it would disappear. And another character and with the interpretation would appear. Thus the Book of Mormon was translated by the gift and power of God and not by any power of man. And he was quoting David Whitmer there, but just kind of shows how the seer stone was used in that process. The D&C section of verses that I found was first D&C 17:1. He says, "Behold, I say unto you that ye must rely upon my word, which if you do with full purpose of heart, you shall have view of the plates, and also of the breastplate, the sword of Laban, the Urim and Thummim, which were given to the brother of Jared upon the mount, which he talked with the Lord face to face, and the miraculous directors which were given to Lehi while in the wilderness on the borders of the Red Sea." I just thought that was interesting that if Joseph came to the Lord with full purpose of heart, he was able to utilize these tools. The second one I found was D&C 130, 8 through 9. It says, "The place where God resides is a great Urim and Thummim. This earth in its sanctified and immortal state will be made like unto a crystal and will be a Urim and Thummim to the inhabitants who dwell thereon, whereby all things pertaining to the inferior kingdom or all kingdoms of the lower order will be manifest to those who dwell on it, and this earth will be Christ." Thought it was just interesting that they were comparing the earth to the Urim and Thummim. The Joseph Smith Papers quote that I was able to find kind of depicts this scenario here in this picture. It says, "Under a stone of considerable size lay the plates deposited in a stone box. This stone was thick and rounding in the middle on the upper side and thinner towards the edges, so that the middle part of it was visible above the ground, but all the edges all around was covered in earth. Having removed the earth off the edge of the stone and obtained a lever, which I got fixed under the edge of the stone, and with a little exertion raised it up. And I looked in, and there indeed did behold the plates and the Urim and Thummim and the breastplate as stated by the messenger. The two key concepts as I kind of wrap up, I think one, the first concept is that these tools, the Urim and Thummim, were used for more than just the translation process. Obviously, that was one of their purposes, was to help translate the Book of Mormon. But as we go back to kind of the example I gave with Abraham, he was able to use the Urim and Thummim to receive revelation from God. So these tools are used for a variety of purposes. And then the second concept is that God is involved in this translation process, and he allows these tools to be used to help facilitate that process. If we think about Joseph Smith, an unlearned farm boy, I don't know if he had the capabilities to be able to do that, perhaps academically, but with the help of these tools, he was able to make that translation process a success. So just wrapping up, I think the key takeaway is that God uses these tools and has used them in the past and uses them today to help aid in his purposes. And I think this kind of goes with how God works in mysterious ways. We don't always know why he does the things the way he does. Why couldn't he have just put the words into Joseph's mind? But I think it's important to learn about these tools that God has used in the past and still uses today. Thank you.